evening, everybody. Welcome to another live episode of The Breakdown. I'm your host, Nate Pike. That's right. My name... I'm doing a bit here because just before we got on, I got a lovely little DM from somebody saying that anybody attached with The Breakdown should say their real name. So there you go. My name is Nate Pike. We're real. They accused us of being Russian bots. Which I love for so many reasons. I'm being told that the title that we have up tonight is January 12th. Rest assured, it is January 19th. It is the day before President Trump's inauguration, and it has been such a week in Alberta politics. I brought reinforcements tonight because the shirt wasn't enough. I had to bring an extra friend to make sure that I could get through this. He's just gonna sit right over there. Keep an eye on things. We got a lot. Oh, so much. I know how we say that at the beginning of every episode. We have so much to talk about, but we have so much to talk about tonight because not only are we going to do a rundown of the absolutely bonkers week that we had in Alberta politics, that reached into national politics, that reached into international politics. But we're also going to be dropping 2 FOIP results. One of them we kind of already dropped on the social media spaces. We're dropping the rest, though. We have a second one, and we're going to do a little bit more detail on the first one. So if anybody here is listening to the audio version, then stick around, because once we get down the rundown, oh boy, we got some things tonight. But let's get right into it, because it was a very hard week for everybody. As you could see, it started off a little bumpy, perhaps, not pillowy soft, perhaps, because as we alluded to on last week's episode, Danielle Smith was going to be holding, and she did hold, a press conference of sorts. It was weird for a whole list of reasons. We're going to talk about some of them, but it was very strange for a whole list of reasons. She had the press conference in response to a bunch of different things that had been going on. The press conference was largely going to be about Donald Trump and the tariffs. Now, it was primarily in response to the fact that last week and a half ago now, almost 2 weeks ago now, Danielle Smith went on vacation, and then she told the province 4 days later. And the reason why she told the province was because there were some social media pictures that leaked of her at Mar A Lago with Kevin O'Leary trying to get selfies with the Donald. The pictures leaked, and then the Smith apparatus leapt into action, releasing statements and making it look like, oh no, this was all totally planned. This wasn't just like a visit with short little Comic-Con style meet and greet. It wasn't that. It was all very serious. That turns out wasn't so serious. But Danielle Smith, in the way that it was positioned, Danielle Smith opened the things up by saying, "Hey, you know what? I went down there because I wanted to deal with the tariffs. I wanted to do the things." And so she did her press conference. Now, we're going to talk about some of the more bizarre elements of the press conference in just a sec, but there's a couple of clips from the press conference. I still struggle to call it that because it was just so odd, that we want to play first.
You'd hinted a little bit earlier that if there is some sort of export ban on Alberta oil, that would precipitate a national unity crisis. From your perspective as Premier of Alberta, what does that look like, other than, I don't know, people being mad in the streets? Or, I mean, is it a separation referendum? Like, what are we talking about when you say national unity crisis?
Well, I can't predict what Albertans would do, but as you know, the part of my strategy over the last 2 years has been to say that we can have a constructive relationship with Canada, and I would.
Now, that's just one line of many that caught a lot of people's attention. And one of the reasons why it caught people's attention, because Danielle Smith said, you know, I want to have a productive relationship with Canada, not the rest of Canada. And given the tone and tenor of her comments and the rhetoric that we've seen coming out of her social media, her office's social media, her staffers' social media, there are a lot of people who are quite concerned that Danielle Smith is, at the very least, fanning the flames, if not all the way leaning into it, of a bit of a separatist rhetoric. We've certainly seen her chief of staff, Patrick Dog Pictures Malkin, has had a rough week in having to delete tweets after he's posted things that are problematic. So with Danielle Smith saying we want to have a good relationship with Canada, not the rest of Canada, it's a little bit of a problematic turn of phrase. But again, Danielle Smith went down there to say, hey, Donald, I know you want to do the tariffs. I totally get where you're coming from. But if you could not tariff Alberta, that would be great. That was her whole strategy. She wants to get an exemption for Alberta oil and gas so that I guess Alberta doesn't have to deal with the consequences of the tariffs. But it didn't go so well.
But were you able to obtain any assurances from the president-elect, Mr. Trump, on the 25% tariffs that are slated to come in now in under a month?
So, Danielle Smith in her press conference. I just have such a hard time calling it a press conference. Zoom meeting, perhaps. Tariffs are still coming. I mean, we're going to find out tomorrow, because tomorrow the new president, Donald Trump, will be sworn into office, and he apparently has over 100 executive orders that are going to be great. I'm sure they're going to be great. Not at all terrible. They're going to be terrible. He's got his executive orders that he's going to be dropping right away. Rumor of 25% tariffs being dropped tomorrow is what everybody's kind of expecting. But we got to talk about how one of the many ways that the press conference went sideways. Because first of all, this is a press conference that Danielle Smith reportedly provided while on vacation, using what appears to have been a cell phone, which is weird. Also weird, it did not go out through any of the normal Government of Alberta channels. For anybody who's unfamiliar, whenever there's a press conference, the Government of Alberta hosts the live stream and then posts and sometimes edited video to their YouTube channel. You can't find this press conference on those places. The only place you could find it was on Danielle Smith's personal YouTube, which was a little bit weird. But where things really got bizarre, I'll just say it, was the setting of the press conference. You can see here, reporter for City TV, Sean Amato, tweeted this out. He had a screen capture of and this is not doctored, for the record. This is not Sean Amato going, I'm going to make Danielle Smith look bad. This is how she chose to present herself on a press conference in dealing with issues of international trade. Do with that what you will. But the tweet from Sean Amato, Alberta's premier appeared to do her morning news conference from a hotel bed. Her office, because he did reach out to her office, will only say she was on vacation with her husband, citing security reasons. So I guess where she turns up next. Now, that touched off a little bit of drama. Touched off just a little bit of drama, because Becca Polak, who is the principal secretary, used to be the chief of director of communication stuffs for Danielle Smith. She got angry, as did the executive director for the Premier of Alberta, Becca Polak. She's sitting on a couch, Sean. If you ever made an effort to gather accurate information, you might actually become a half-decent journalist. Your so-called reporting, in scare quotes, is nothing more than biased commentary with no attempt at fairness or balance. You see, Becca Polak believes if you're going to call yourself a journalist, the standards. You must have the standards. You must have the fairness, the balancing of the things. The executive director for the Premier's office, Rob Anderson, doubled in and said, Sean Amato is a journalist? Huh, who knew? Which is, there's some things that they say about delegitimizing the press, or attempts to delegitimize the press. To be clear, Sean Amato was not the first or only person who said, why is Danielle Smith doing this conference from bed? Because to all outward appearances. And despite the strong protestations of Becca Polak, it looks like she did the press conference. It really does look like she did the press conference from bed. That's what it looks like. No one will know except for Danielle Smith, who also lies. Whether or not she did it from bed, it'll be a mystery for time immemorial. But it chewed up quite a bit of the energy of the political conversation in Alberta, trying to figure out whether or not Danielle Smith had done the press conference from bed. There were people getting all Zapruder film me with it, trying to figure out, well, if she picked a glass of water up from here and then she moves it over there, that's not a couch. It's got to be a bed. It was a fantastic debate. But the bigger point here is the fact that Becca Polak and Rob Anderson, who, by the way, the rumor, unconfirmed, the rumor is the reason why everybody was traveling is because it was Rob Anderson's wedding. So if that's the case, happy wedding, Rob. That's why everybody was not in Panama. They were elsewhere. And Danielle Smith made a little side trip from the wedding to Mar A Lago and then to her vacation home in Panama. That's the rumor. Unconfirmed. Do with that what you will. But the delegitimizing of actual journalists like Sean Amato, and Sean Amato is an actual journalist. You cannot like the fact that Sean Amato said she appeared to be in bed, but she appeared to be in bed. If it looks like she's in bed, and he did reach out to the office and the office didn't clarify, then it's a perfectly reasonable assumption to make. To his credit, Sean Amato also said after the fact, okay, so despite how it appeared, she was not in bed. The Premier's office said that she was on a couch. But Becca Polak, high standards for who she'll do business with, who the government should do business with. Certainly would never consider doing business with someone who would post something like this. This is a tweet. Oh gosh. Oh boy. Seems a little biased. I don't know. From Cat Canada, who is the news editor for a little organization we're maybe going to talk about later called The Counter Signal. She retweeted Mark Carney's announcement that he had raised a certain amount of money. Mark Carney, of course, announced his intention to run for leader of the Federal Liberal Party. Cat Canada, from a totally unbiased, fair, balanced, even journalism standpoint, tweets out, "Did you see the logo I made for you? Carney Marks." See, it's like Karl Marx, but Carney Marks. So it's very clever play on words. Creepy, commie, Carney. Now, of course, Becca Polak would never support in any way, fiscally or otherwise, or allow the government to support fiscally or otherwise, an organization that was practicing that sort of fair and balanced stuffs. Right? That would never, ever happen. But Danielle Smith saying she's going to fight back. She's going to make sure that, we're going to placate the Trump. We're going to play nice. We're going to go to breakfast and golf and stuff. But there were a lot of people who are pretty heavy hitters on the political scene at one time or another who have said very much the different. Jason Kenney came out in a news article where he said, and this is a quote, "Generally, we need to be prepared to retaliate in kind to any unfair tariffs imposed on us by the United States. We can't be wusses about this. We have to have a spine." That's Jason Kenney. And a lot of people can say, oh, Jason Kenney, I don't like him. And he's not really, maybe he's not all that relevant anymore because he's not like he's the Premier of Alberta. He's just on a bunch of boards. It's not like there's any other major conservative political figures who have stepped out and said, oh, wait, yes, there is. Because the granddaddy of conservatism, current conservatism in Canada, he had some thoughts to share too.
Now, drugs, guns, crime, most of those things flow north, not south. A lot more flows into Canada from the United States than flows out of it. So, I have a real problem with some of the things Donald Trump is saying. It doesn't sound to me like the pronouncements of somebody, I say, wants a better deal or whatever, fine. But it doesn't sound to me like the pronouncements of somebody who's a friend, a partner, and an ally, which is what I've.
That was Stephen Harper. So Stephen Harper is even calling out the pronouncements of Donald Trump. It seems like just about everybody who's not the current premier of Alberta or employed by the current premier of Alberta is saying, hey, we got to take a hard stance against this guy because he's playing a very dangerous game and we could have some very real problems. I should correct myself there. I should take a second and correct myself there because there are some folks who aren't the premier of Alberta, but they do have kind of some business before the premier of Alberta who have taken a bit of a more Danny stance, talking about Kevin O'Leary from the Shark Tank. And I don't know if my wife had drinks before she killed those two people with the boat. Kevin O'Leary. He did some media rounds himself this week that were pretty controversial.
You're a Canadian citizen, and this is economic Armageddon if these tariffs come in, as you well know. Unemployment is going to go through the roof. Economic growth is going to go down. Provincial governments.
I appreciate you saying that, but neither of us know. We just don't know. You've got to wait. My point is, wouldn't you rather have your adversary's cell phone number on speed dial? I would.
No, look,
only one. The only one in Canada that was smart enough to go and meet him.
Well, I mean, Prime Minister Trudeau and Dominic LeBlanc did go have dinner with him at Mar A Lago, right?
Excuse me. Let me just make I asked Trump to ignore those meetings because those people are going to get eradicated in the next election. And I hope he took my advice. Stop wasting your time with Trudeau and any of the cabinet. They're going to get eradicated.
But I
did that personally. That was on me.
Understood. But it is the government we have at this point in time. With a week to go until the inauguration and possibly the implementation of tariffs. So you're saying it is unclear to you if he's going to do this.
What I told Trump was it's the government that took a quarter of the Canadian population into poverty, and they're going soon.
Okay.
They will not be at a theater near you anytime soon.
Okay, but for the next week, they're there, Mr. O'Leary, right? And this is the deadline for the tariffs, right? Because if you take Donald Trump by his statement that
My point
day
is,
one...
You don't know that. You don't know that.
I'm taking him at his word. What am I supposed to do? He hasn't said anything to the contrary that I'm not actually going to do it. He said I'm going to hit them. It's going to be day one, along with mass deportations. You have been there talking to him. Are you saying we shouldn't expect that? Because the Canadian economy and the political class is bracing for it.
You are not able to separate the signal from the noise. You can't do it. You're just listening to the noise and you're reporting it and you're actually accelerating the hype around it. You are not distinguishing the signal. You don't get it. This is a large, difficult negotiation we're starting, and it goes towards an economic union. That's where we're going. Get over it.
Okay, but if it is an economic union, why doesn't the president-elect say that rather than talk about tariffs, fentanyl, and migrants crossing the border? Like, politicians, when they lay out very clear things...
You have been listening to Trump for 12 years. You asked me that question? That's not his style.
So much to unpack in that clip. Let's start with Kevin O'Leary. Still has his Canadian citizenship, openly saying, oh yeah, no, I was totally undermining the federal government. I was totally telling Donald Trump that he shouldn't listen to any representatives from the federal government because I don't think he should, because they're going to be out in the next election. You want to make sure that you're only talking to people who have, and listening to people who have the mandate of elected office, said Kevin O'Leary, who's never had, nor does he currently have, a mandate of elected office. So there's a little bit of, I don't know, what's the word I'm looking for here? Maybe some hypocrisy going on here. But I just want to take a quick second to highlight one other little thing in that clip, because Mr. O'Leary talked about how, oh, you simple-minded people, you think that you hear that the tariffs are coming. It's you simple people who can't separate the signal from the noise. You need to have an advanced mind to really understand what's going on here, because it's the simple-minded people who think that the tariffs are coming because they can't separate the signal from the noise.
But were you able to obtain any assurances from the president-elect, Mr. Trump, on the 25% tariffs that are slated to come in now in under a month?
Whoops. Kevin O'Leary, of course, was the host of Danielle Smith. She was his guest at Mar A Lago. So, do with that what you will. But that only gets us believe it or not, that only gets us to Wednesday. Wednesday was the Council of the Federation meeting called by still the Prime Minister, and foreseeably so for at least a couple more months, Justin Trudeau. Now, he called this meeting specifically to address the question of tariffs and how to respond to the tariffs. So that's an important thing to keep in mind. This is something that is in many ways an economic existential threat to the country of Canada for the foreseeable future, as long as Donald Trump just decides to implement the tariffs and continue on the road with the tariffs. And if he decides to go with the mass deportations, he's talking about 5 million people, and they're not all going to go south. So Canada's got to have a little bit of a plan for how we're going to deal with these things. And so they put together a little bit of a statement. And it was released by Mackenzie Gray, who's another journalist. He released it as soon as it came out. We're going to put it on the screen right now. And you can see there's nothing terribly controversial in this statement. There's nothing particularly that's unreasonable. First paragraph, Canada and the United States have the closest and most successful partnership in the world. At their meeting today, Canada's first ministers reiterated that the two countries are stronger, more prosperous, and safer when they work together. First ministers discussed ways to protect families, workers, and employers from the consequences of possible U.S. tariffs, which would cause economic harm to Canadians and Americans alike. Trade and investment between Canada and the U.S. supports millions of jobs on both sides of the border and helps to ensure the secure flow of goods and people between countries. They will continue to work together, standing up for Canadians in the face of unjustified and unreasonable U.S. tariffs. Collaborative efforts will continue to try to prevent U.S. tariffs, including actions taken by the federal government to strengthen border security and curb the flow of illicit drugs such as fentanyl into Canadian and American communities. And this is where it gets, there's a little bit more about we're going to do law enforcement. The next two paragraphs, though. First ministers agreed that enhancing border security must be undertaken by authorities on both sides of the Canadian-U.S. border to stop the flow of illegal firearms. First ministers agreed to continue united advocacy efforts with key U.S. administration, congressional, and business leaders to emphasize the negative impacts of U.S. tariffs on American national interests in the U.S. economy. Cooperation with Canada offers significant complementary benefits to U.S. priorities. This is the most important paragraph here, I think. While they are making every effort to prevent U.S. tariffs, first ministers are committed to continuing to work together on a full range of measures to ensure a robust response to possible U.S. tariffs, including supports for sectors, businesses, and individuals. If the federal government implements retaliatory measures, it will ensure the rapid availability of substantial resources that effectively mitigate economic impacts to workers and businesses. This includes, but is not limited to, the distribution of revenues. That's the monies from potential retaliatory tariffs as quickly as possible. They agreed to take a collaborative approach to U.S. engagement that recognizes the unique economic needs of all provinces and territories. So, let's be clear. What the statement effectively said is, yeah, we need to do a better job at the borders, for sure. Totally acknowledge that. We would really like to avoid the tariffs, for sure. Totally acknowledge that. Nobody in Canada is going to be left on their own. If we put tariffs in, we will be doing so in order to raise funds to cover the industries that are most affected by the American tariffs. We're going to pull together as a country to make sure that the people who are hurt by Donald Trump and his tariffs are taken care of. They're covered. We're going to move money around to make sure they're covered. This is not a statement that was just put together by Justin Trudeau. This is a statement that was agreed upon by every single premier in the country of Canada, except one, Danielle Smith. Because never let a good crisis go by if you can find a way to weaponize it. That is the statement. You can go back and pause on the screen if you want to read the whole thing, or you can go to our social media. We reposted the stuff from the journalist who posted it. There's nothing in that statement that says, ha, 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 we're going to get Alberta so hard and leave them out to dry. In fact, the statement says the opposite. It is a commitment from everybody in Canada. We're going to stand together. We're going to make sure that if there is economic hardship, that we're moving money around to make sure that people are covered. That is not at all how Danielle Smith, though, chose to present it in any way. And it's really unfortunate because Danielle Smith did attend the meeting where the statement was discussed. She made it clear that she couldn't abide signing the statement because, I don't know, she has a good opportunity to weaponize the crisis, I suppose. But where it gets really unfortunate is that she didn't attend the press conference. Because after the meeting, there was a press conference that was held by all of the first ministers and the prime minister to talk about the concerns, to talk about the things. And you'd better believe Danielle Smith's name sure came up.
When the tariffs come, it's going to affect Albertans. It's going to affect people from BC and Saskatchewan and Manitoba, Ontario, Quebec, all the way down the road. No one's exempt from that. And all I believe in, if it comes to that, let's have the tools in our toolbox to react, to send a strong message. But it's not going to be all of a sudden one province or one territory is exempt on this. When Donald Trump comes at us, he's not going to say, well, let's not worry about Ontario, they're good people, or Alberta. He's coming full tilt at Canadians as a whole. And that's one thing we have to understand. We need to be united. Donald Trump is a brilliant negotiator. That's what he's done his whole life. That's exactly what he's done. And he's sitting there with a big smile on his face thinking, wow, I'm going to divide and conquer. Remember one thing, united we stand, divided we fall.
That was Ontario Premier Doug Ford talking about if Canada isn't united as a country against Donald Trump and his tariffs, that creates division that will inevitably end up handing the keys to Donald Trump, which shouldn't be what anybody who considers themselves to be a Canadian wants. It's really important to highlight that. Now, there were two ministers who were telecommuting into that meeting and that press conference. David Eby was not immediately present at the press conference, but he did, at the meeting. Sorry, he wasn't physically there. He did issue a statement, though.
Well, I certainly hope that it doesn't come to a point where Canada needs to impose export tariffs or export bans. And in fact, I hope that we don't end up in a situation where there are tariffs at all placed by the Americans, that they come to their senses. All they're doing is taxing themselves. And it's going to dramatically increase prices for everyday Americans. But should it come to it, I support the federal government taking the steps that are necessary. And I just know that as a Canadian, and as a British Columbian, that I'm going to stand strong with premiers to make sure that we're not limiting the tools available to the federal government to respond to this, to make sure that the tariffs are as short as possible if they are imposed, that we're protecting jobs here. And the key message that I had that I think is entirely consistent with what Premier Smith was raising is that it needs to be regionally proportionate. If there are tariffs that are impacting BC, then they need to be similarly impacting other provinces across the country. We can't be turning to BC and Alberta to carry all the weight of the retaliation against the United States. It's a shared responsibility. This is economic wartime. And when we're in that situation as Canadians, we all pitch in to protect our people, to protect our jobs.
So even David Eby is making it very, very clear there that, hey, you know what? I'm all about, we got to make sure. I don't want BC to carry the whole load. I don't want Alberta to carry the whole load. And it is, I'm happy to acknowledge that it is a premier's responsibility to protect their province. But there's a hierarchy of things that are supposed to exist. And one of those things is supposed to be Canada comes first. Canada comes before the provinces, because together as a federation, when we're all pulling in the same direction, when we're all striving for the same ideals. That's where Canada is strongest. Canada is stronger as a country than Alberta is as a province, or BC is as a province, or Saskatchewan, or any other provinces. We are stronger together, as Doug Ford said. Hurts to say that. We're stronger united than we are divided. David Eby recognizes that. David Eby signed on to the statement because it's perfectly reasonable to raise the concern. Hey, guys, I want to make sure not one province gets screwed on this, okay? If we're going to get screwed, we all get screwed together. And they issued the statement saying, yes, we will all get screwed together. Nobody's going to get disproportionately screwed by Donald Trump's tariffs, except for, again, Danielle Smith. But that did not stop Danielle Smith from issuing a couple of statements of her own. On the day of the premier's meeting, I had a constructive discussion with my fellow premiers on how best to deal with the threat of tariffs from the incoming U.S. administration. We agreed on several strategies, and I look forward to continue to work with them on this critical issue. However, and immediately, it's all about attacking the feds. However, federal government officials continue to publicly and privately float the idea of cutting off energy supplies to the U.S. and imposing export tariffs on Alberta energy and other products to the United States. Until these threats cease, Alberta will not be able to fully support the federal government's plan on dealing with the threatened tariffs. Alberta will not simply will not agree to export tariffs on our energy or other products, nor do we support a ban on exports of these same products. We will take whatever actions are needed to protect the livelihoods of Albertans from such destructive federal policies. And then she's got this graphic that she included with all of her social media statements. And the graphic has no Ottawa tariffs on Alberta energy exports. And as she says in her statement, no Ottawa tariffs. And she does a great job of having a perfectly visible American flag, but her text covers up the maple leaf. I just don't even know what to do with that. Somebody got paid to put that graphic together with the text covering up the maple leaf, but leaving the United States fully visible. Somebody greenlit that. Somebody posted that to Danielle Smith's social media channels. Nobody stopped for a second to think, hey, what message are we sending here? But that wasn't the only statement that Danielle Smith threw up. And I feel like I'm using that term perfectly. After the premier's meeting, she put up a second one where she talked about a real Team Canada approach. And she listed off 5 points. Stop threatening the livelihood of tens of thousands of Albertans via an energy export. Immediately start construction on the Northern Gateway and Energy East pipelines, which again is just like such a dumb conversation. We'll get into that in a sec. Tell Germany, Japan, and the rest of the world that there is in fact a business case for Canadian oil and gas to be sold to them. Repeal the unconstitutional and job-killing production cap. There is no production cap. Electricity regs and C-69 treat with respect and as an equal partner to the Alberta taxpayers that have been transferring hundreds of billions to Quebec, the Maritimes, and even Ontario for decades. Now, okay, then, let's do this, I guess, because we apparently have to talk about the dumb things that Danielle Smith says. First of all, everything in her Team Canada approach there is about Alberta and how Alberta is the great victim of confederation. And I'm sorry, but as somebody who was born in this province, who was raised in this province, who has lived in this province pretty much my entire life, we're not victims. We're very lucky that we have the oil and gas resources that we can use to build a stronger country, but we're not victims. You take a look at how many people come from across the country to work in Alberta so they can support their families back wherever in Canada they're from. I don't have a problem with that because I'm a Canadian first. But the whole grievance politics of Northern Gateway and Energy East, there's two pieces that I want to just quickly talk about the Northern Gateway piece. First of all, Northern Gateway was fraud for a lot of different reasons. And yes, Justin Trudeau did pull the final plug on it. But if you take a look, please just go to Wikipedia and read the history of Northern Gateway, because there was an unofficial tanker ban that existed in that area. There were environmental assessments that were done that determined that if there was a spill in that part of the world, Canada, the resources simply weren't in place to mitigate the spills and the catastrophic effect that it would have on the environment. There's a lot of complex, nuanced reasons that Northern Gateway was shut down, and it's not just Justin Trudeau is a big meanie. That's not it. Same thing with Energy East. It is mind-blowing to me how a premier who is all about, hey, we're a province, we get to decide what happens inside of our borders. We get to make those decisions. Nobody gets to tell us what we're going to do inside of Alberta's borders, is then saying that the federal government should somehow force other provinces to bend to Alberta's will. It just doesn't work that way. It sucks that Quebec made the decision to kill Energy East. I'm not arguing that. Was it their decision to make? Yes. Does it suggest perhaps that Alberta did not do a great value proposition in saying this pipeline would be wonderful? Also, yes. But you can't stand screaming at the top of a hill, sovereignty, 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 and then not allow the other equal provinces to do the same thing. And finally, the equalization piece. Please just go into our back catalog and watch the conversations that we've done with Trevor Toome. It's embarrassing the way that we have politicians continually misleading people in regards to how equalization works. It's dumb. It's embarrassing. It's a federal program. It's paid out of general revenues. Alberta doesn't make transfer payments to other provinces. We pay our income tax. We pay more because we have historically earned more than any other province. I'm sorry that we're wealthy. I don't know what to do. But let's just go back for a second before I get too wound up, because Daniel Smith included this wonderful little graphic here of a real Team Canada approach. Oh, it's so Team Canada. Look at it. We've got the Alberta logo on the graphic, and we can see these two people in blue suits staring optimistically across the future of their great oil refinery that amplifies the Team Canada approach. That's so Albertan, so Canada, so Germany. It is a stock photo from iStock from Germany. So even when, hat tip to Disordered, YYC, my favorite social media account, even when Daniel Smith is trying to say to the rest of the country, oh, come on, guys, we got to do the Team Canada approach for Alberta. She can't even use a picture from Alberta. And in fact, she uses a picture from another country. But please, we should take her very seriously. For all of Danielle Smith's issues that she listed off, those 5 things, the export tax on energy, don't touch the energy, the pipelines, telling Germany and Japan and the rest of the world that their own assessments are completely wrong. There is a business case. Just trust us. All of the things that Daniel Smith lists off, all of those things have to do with oil and gas. And it feels like maybe somebody should remind her that when we take a look at the flag of Alberta, the shield that lives on that flag, what do you see? The very first thing? It's not an oil derrick. It's not a German refinery. It's wheat. Daniel Smith is standing up for one industry and one industry only. And if you want to take the argument that it's Daniel Smith's job to stand up for Alberta, sure. But that means she has to stand up for all of Alberta. And I recognize that a great deal of the provincial budget comes from royalties. But then let's talk about what we're actually talking about. Daniel Smith is standing up only for the industry that is making the government the most money. And if we're going to have that conversation, let's at least have that conversation from an honest place. But so far, Daniel Smith isn't even doing that. There's a lot more to Alberta than just oil and gas. Yes, oil and gas makes Alberta a lot of money. Yes, it pays for a lot of the bills because we failed to historically diversify our economy. But if you take a look at even the Premier's shield logo, it's got wheat on it. It's got forestry on it. It's got mountains on it. Those are the symbols that live in the hearts and minds of Albertans for what this province represents. But it's starting to look more and more like the symbols that exist on the Alberta flag and on Danielle Smith's own shield that she commissioned, that somebody built in Canva, I guess. Those aren't a list of things to be proud about, Albertan. That's a to-do list of the industries to be left behind or destroyed. Moving on from there. I told you it was going to be a hot little show tonight. Before we move on entirely, though, there's one other video clip that I want to play because it does highlight a couple of really important things. And I know, I've said this before, I am not a Trudeau stan, as the kids say. But he is the Prime Minister of our country. He has been for a good number of years. He won't be for very much longer. But at a press conference, literally the next day, he did share some thoughts that I think everybody would do well to listen to.
I think it was really important yesterday as we met with first ministers from across the country that premiers have an opportunity to express the interests of their citizens, of their industry, of their area. Certainly, I don't blame Danielle Smith for speaking up for her industry. That's part of her job. But every single premier other than Danielle Smith then chose to put Canada first and say, but we're all part of Team Canada because what happens to any part of us happens to all of us, and we will be there to respond strongly, to fight for Canada, and to do it in a united way that makes sure that it's fair across all industries, across all regions. That was what we came together yesterday to do. I would actually like to point out to Danielle Smith that Canadians know the importance of standing up for each other. That's why Canadian taxpayers bought the Trans Mountain Pipeline Expansion, TMX, to be able to get Albertan oil to new markets. That was an investment that all Canadians made, that the Alberta government is making billions of dollars off of, because in what was a very difficult decision, the federal government, we made the decision to purchase and build and complete that pipeline. That's an example of all Canadians standing up for Alberta and getting it done. So yes, premiers should be advocating for their own industries, their own country, their own communities, but they should also put their country first, as every single premier except Danielle Smith did. Now, I could point to any number of those premiers and point out lots of moments in which they have points of disagreement with me. From Doug Ford to Scott Moe to Tim Houston to even David Eby and Wab Kinew and others. There's all sorts of disagreements we're going to have. But when push comes to shove, every single one of them are Canadians first. And yes, they're going to look out for their communities, but they also know that looking out for all of us is what everyone in their
And that's as an Albertan who is Canadian first. That's where I'd like to leave things for just a moment. Because the Prime Minister isn't wrong. Canada paid for TMX together. Canada has done a lot of things for Alberta. And it might be easier, it might be more convenient, it might be more comfortable, because then we can lean into the victim narrative to say, oh, we just keep getting screwed all the time. But we're lying to ourselves, and we're lying to anyone that we say that to. And that is, to me, as an Albertan, not what being an Albertan is about. Moving on from there. We got to talk about tomorrow. And for the record, again, I know that we'll fix the date on the header later. Tomorrow's January 20th. It's the Inauguration Day. And there's been a lot of conversation about Danielle Smith attending, maybe not attending. Hard to say, I guess, the inauguration of soon-to-be president, Donald Trump. So let's walk through some things, because there's some misconceptions. There's some misinformation and disinformation that's out there. There is a whole conversation and debate to be had about whether or not Danielle Smith should be down in Washington right now. We're going to touch on that a little bit. But there's a couple of pieces that we have to kind of get out of the way first. One of them is the tickets. So Danielle Smith, there's a lot of questions. Oh, Danielle Smith, will she be going to the inauguration? Will she not be going to the inauguration? She said she wanted to go to the inauguration. She said she's going down there no matter what, and she'll meet with people and go to parties and enjoy the finest of couches. But will she get tickets? She got tickets. Everybody was shocked when just before Christmas, the news came out that Alberta Premier Danielle Smith did indeed get tickets to the inauguration. Wow, sounds like such a big deal until you go to the U.S. government website. Because if you go to the U.S. government website on inaugurations, there's a very, very informative little paragraph on how do you get tickets to the presidential inauguration. So these are all the people who get to sit in the bleachers and the wide shots and the chairs and all the things. The Joint Congressional Commission on Inaugural Ceremonies makes a limited number of inauguration tickets available to the public through members of Congress. Tickets are free and allow you to watch in person on the grounds of the U.S. Capitol as the president and the vice president are sworn in on January 20th, 2025. Tickets will be available from your members of Congress. In the weeks leading up to the inauguration, some members may begin accepting requests for tickets before then. So how do you get these free tickets? You just have to have a congressperson who will give you some. That's it. Now, the travel, the hotels, all the other things, those are different. Those are expensive. The hotel prices in DC go through the roof when there's an inauguration because everybody goes there. But in a cruel twist of fate, because the forecast for Washington, DC is frigid as he checks the current temperature currently in Calgary, it's minus 18. The city has not shut down. Washington, D.C., however, is kind of sort of shutting down. They've shut down the inauguration. They're moving it inside for a very, very small group of people. There is going to be an arena viewing at the Capital One Arena, because of course it's the Capital One Arena, where people can go and watch it on the whatever the Jumbotrons are called these days. And Donald's going to come by later and be like, hey, everybody, thanks for watching me on TV. There's that. But the outdoor inauguration piece, that's done. That includes Danielle Smith. So Danielle Smith doesn't get to use her free tickets to there anymore. This all comes on the heels of Donald Trump putting out a post on his Truth Social, where he said that the weather forecast for Washington, D.C. with the wind chill factor could take the temperature into severe record lows. My God, -4. There's an Arctic blast sweeping the country. I don't want to see people hurt or injured in any way. It is dangerous conditions for the tens of thousands of law enforcement, first responders, police, canines, and even horses, and hundreds of thousands of supporters. I love how the dogs and the horses came before the hundreds of thousands of supporters that will be outside for many hours. They're going to order the inauguration address, in addition to prayers and other speeches, to be delivered in the United States Capitol Rotunda, as was used by Ronald Reagan in 1985. Also, because of very cold weather, the various dignitaries and guests will be brought into the Capitol. This will be a very beautiful experience for all, and especially for the large TV audience, because it's all about those advertising dollars, baby. But yeah. Danielle Smith, it has been confirmed by CBC, will not be attending that. Where it does get interesting, though, is Danielle Smith did release her itinerary, and that's part of an interesting little conversation, because she traveled to Washington on the 18th, and then the rest of the time is meeting with U.S. governors and industry leaders. And I love how this thing is written, because they ran out of adjectives. Engage with key U.S. decision makers. Engage with key U.S. decision makers. governors, industry leaders, thought leaders, and then they had to go back to decision makers and elected officials. So the whole thing is basically, when it comes to the land of Danielle Smith, the whole thing is basically a giant networking exercise. Now, you might wonder, why is Danielle Smith doing this networking? Why does she have to travel down there? If everybody else is watching the thing on TV, why isn't she watching the thing on TV? And it turns out, if you take a look at her spending, as again was reported by Sean Amato, she likes to travel. She likes to travel. $326,000 spent in her first year in office. $217,000 in her second year in office. For last year, set some pretty good records there as well. Danielle Smith is well on the way to spending upwards of $1 million in travel. Danielle Smith likes to travel. It's almost as if one might think that Danielle Smith is I don't know, using the taxpayer's purse to subsidize the lifestyle that she wishes she could have, but wouldn't be able to afford on her own. Because again, over 3 years, it's creeping well up to it's getting towards the $1 million mark in traveling. That's how much she spent in traveling, just going places. It's a shame that she has never heard of for all of these meetings, all of these places, all of these important conversations. It's a shame that Danielle Smith, nobody's introduced her to the opportunity of telepresence, of Zoom, because you can imagine how much money she could be saving. I mean, she's sharing the taxpayers' money right now, but you can imagine how much money she would be saving taxpayers if she just took the time to telecommute to a couple of meetings. Apparently, nobody has told her that. Oh, wait, yes, they have. Because when it came to do the meeting with the premiers and the prime minister about the economic crisis facing the country and the province, how did Danielle Smith attend? She attended via the webs. I don't know if it was Zoom. I don't know if it was Skype. I am not privy to that kind of information, but she attended there. So for all of the traveling, for these important conversations and meetings, it's more of I get to go and get my selfie taken with all of my Republican heroes than it is I'm actually doing work for Albertans. But the chef's kiss to the inauguration piece has to be the announcement that came out yesterday. Yesterday was such a busy day because yesterday it came out, 2 days ago it came out that Donald Trump, President-elect of the United States, he's not traveling to the WEF's annual meeting in 2025. Oh no, he's virtually doing it. So not only is the Donald attending the WEF, which Danielle Smith has some thoughts about, but he's also going to be doing it virtually. Hey, what did Danielle have to say about the WEF just a couple of years ago?
What do you find distasteful about it?
I guess I find it distasteful when billionaires brag about how much control they have over political leaders, as the head of that organization has. And I think that is offensive. The people who should be directing government are the people who vote for them. And the people who vote for me and for my colleagues are people who live in Alberta and who are affected by our decisions. And so, quite frankly, until that organization stops bragging about how much control they have over political leaders, I have no interest in being involved with them. My focus is here in Alberta, solving problems.
Danielle Smith strongly believes, I would never, ever spend any time with anybody who brags about how much influence they have over political leaders. And yep, we're playing that clip again.
You're a Canadian citizen, and this is economic Armageddon if these tariffs come in, as you well know. Unemployment is going to go through the roof. Economic growth is going to go down. Provincial governments.
I appreciate you saying that, but neither of us know. We just don't know. You've got to wait. My point is, wouldn't you rather have your adversary's cell phone number on speed dial? I would.
No, look,
only one. The only one in Canada that was smart enough to go and meet him.
Well, I mean, Prime Minister Trudeau and Dominic LeBlanc did go have dinner with him at Mar A Lago, right?
Excuse me. Let me just make a. I asked Trump to ignore those meetings because.
Gosh, it's almost as if there's a little bit of hypocrisy at play here. It's almost as if Danielle Smith came into office running great guns on, we've got to stand up for the little people. We can't have the uber rich and wealthy getting us access to presidents at their resort. We can't have the uber rich and wealthy telling president-elects who they should and should not ignore from other governments, especially the governments that are ours. We can't have that. Here's the thing. We're going to talk about Kevin a little bit more for just a sec here. But here's the thing. One of the mantras that you hear from this new brand of people that call themselves conservatives, and again, I want to be clear, I am not denigrating all conservatives, okay? What I'm denigrating is the people who have assumed the name of conservatives. They've called themselves conservatives, but they're not anything that would have passed for conservatism 20, 30, 40 years ago. They're not that. They're this new thing. These people who call themselves conservatives, one of the things they love to say, you hear it all the time, is, let's get rid of the DEI. People should be judged by the content of their character. Well, maybe they should be. Now, I don't believe that they should be exclusively judged by that. But once somebody shows you the content of their character, maybe it is, especially if they're people who say we should be judging people on the content of their character. Maybe it is okay to judge them just a little bit. Because if we do, Kevin O'Leary sold out his home country. He subverted his home country's government. I wonder what that says about his character. Danielle Smith has repeatedly made her character quite clear. She'll say one thing, she'll do another. But when we talk about all of the different things that Danielle Smith has unequivocally thrown her support behind, she has shown more support for Australian and American millionaires and billionaires, certainly, than she has shown for Canada. And if we are truly to judge someone on the content of their character, maybe it's about time we start doing a little bit more of that with Danny. But we're not done with Kevin yet, because we got to talk about this whole Wonder Valley debacle. For anybody who's unfamiliar, Kevin O'Leary likes to call himself Mr. Wonderful. I don't know why. I legitimately don't know why. I think that if you have to give yourself that nickname, we'll just leave it there. But he has said that he's going to build a giant AI data center in northern Alberta, in the Grand Prairie area. He's going to spend billions of dollars making this thing happen. And a lot of people got very excited because there's a little bit of economic hardship going on in rural Alberta and northern Alberta. And the idea that there's Mr. Wonderful is going to bring in all of these wonderful new jobs and all of this stuff. There's some folks that got really excited about it, Danielle Smith being one of them. It's almost as if their little Venn diagrams started to overlap shortly after he made this announcement. There's also a lot of people say it's never going to happen. There's a lot of people who are saying that it's a publicity stunt. Time will tell. But there's also some people who have some very, very real concerns, because the Sturgeon Lake Cree Nation has raised some concerns about the environmental and other impacts of what this data center could look like. They actually issued a 3-page open letter that included a cease and desist demand. But it also included some very important questions. And if you want to know how the government of Alberta is currently doing business, these questions get to be really worth taking a closer look at. Question number 1, funding for the AI data center. Mr. O'Leary implies that the Premier traveled with him and O'Leary, and the Premier were meeting with proposed foreign investigators. Did the Premier travel internationally with Mr. O'Leary in support of this project? If so, who did the Premier meet with and when? We would like to know the nature of the discussions in any such meetings. Number 2, the alleged permit. Mr. O'Leary alleges that the Premier gave him a, quote, permit for 200 acres and possibly for 200 trillion cubic feet of natural gas. Did the Premier give a permit to Mr. O'Leary? If so, we request a copy of the application and the permit and any consultation regarding the issuance of the permit. Number 3, this one gets to be really important. Water licenses. Greenview states that they have water licenses, presumably for the Smoky River, which is our water source. Is this true? If so, how and when did they acquire water licenses? Please provide us with documentation regarding this license, including the consultation records. This duty to consult piece that you may start to be noticing here. Number 4, regulatory applications. We would like to know what applications have been submitted to provincial regulators in relation to this province, including to the Alberta Utilities Commission and the Alberta Energy Regulator. All projects of this scale require regulatory approvals, and in accordance with the Constitution and Treaty Number 8, they require consultation and accommodation with our nation when they impact or could impact our traditional territory. Number 5, advising a private investor. As suggested by Mr. Glubish, Nate Glubish, we would like to know whether and how the Crown has been advising this proponent on how to navigate the regulatory framework. These statements raise at least the appearance of a conflict of interest. So right out of the gates, we got some problems going on with this project. There's some very important questions that exist with this project. It's going to be fascinating to see how it plays out. But again, the Sturgeon Lake Cree Nation did say, hey, we're throwing a cease and desist out on this bad boy because you haven't answered any of these questions. And there's a lot of concerns that maybe the government isn't doing business the way that it's supposed to. Gosh, I can't imagine the UCP behaving in a way that would be a conflict of interest in reality, if not in violation of ethics laws. That's never happened before. Moving on from there. So it was a week. And we have been sitting on 2 FOIP results that we knew were going to get some attention. And we weren't, one of them was the one we're going to talk about them both tonight. I'm just going to let that out. Because there's 2 pieces that we've been trying to find the right moment. And we weren't expecting, I mean, we're kind of expecting, but not like expecting the political apocalypse to reveal itself quite as quickly and as enthusiastically as it has so far this year. So we were kind of like, oh, we're gonna hint. We're gonna drop some hints. We're gonna do some teasers, and then we'll reveal them when the time is, when there's room for them in the conversation. And there's not going to be any room in the conversation, possibly ever again, because everything's so terrible. But we're going to get 2 of them out of the way tonight. We have a bunch more that are pending because we have an amazing audience. Our Patreon supporters are fantastic. And so they give us the funding that we can do to file all of these FOIPs. And we've crowdfunded a couple of very big FOIPs that we're waiting for the results on. We're neck deep in FOIPs. So we're going to clear 2 of our FOIP results out tonight. One of them we've already kind of talked about, but let's get into it. Mark Carney made an announcement. Mark Carney announced that he was going to be running for the federal liberal leadership. And there was some controversy that happened at the announcement. First of all, there were some people who signed up for tickets to the event, but maybe didn't identify themselves so much as media. And they were not allowed in. Can't actually cough. I did that wrong. And the Western Standard also was told that they were not allowed, they were not considered to be journalists, which is at a private event, an entirely reasonable thing. If Cian Bexty or a Western Standard reporter came to your front door and said, hey, we want to see what's going on in your kitchen. We heard it was taco night. We want to confirm that. Then you would have every right to say, off you go, or I'll call the police. Which is exactly what Mark Carney did. But there was another publicity stunt that happened at the event. Somebody ordered a limo designed to look like a Rolls Royce. And it got weird. So obviously this is a political prank. This is something to try to comment on. Oh, Mark Carney's got money. So look, he rented it wasn't Mark Carney's limo. He showed up in a car and sneakers, apparently. But the limousine rolled up nonetheless. And there were rumors as to who rented the limousine. Now, there's been a bunch of real journalists who have reached out to the limousine company, and the limousine company inexplicably has said, oh, no, we didn't take any information or a phone number or a deposit or a credit card number or a name. Somebody said they would want us to bring our big expensive limo. So we paid our driver and the gasoline to go and do that without any sort of possible recourse for getting money. So we can't tell you who rented the limo. That's what the limo company is saying. But there were a bunch of rumors going on in regards to who rented the limo. We put up a tweet because some of those rumors were that perhaps one of the more far-righty media organizations had rented the limo. So we put up a little tweet. If the rumors that this limo was hired by one of the far-right media orgs like the Counter Signal, well, we called it the Counterproductive Signal. Remember, the Counter Signal and Western Standard both received taxpayer dollars from the government of Alberta. Now, to be clear, we did not say, because we're not stupid, that, it was the Counter Signal. The Counter Signal did it. It was them. We didn't say that. Nope, we didn't say that at all. We just said if there's any truth to the rumors that it was a far-right media organization, there are a few far-right media organizations in the province of Alberta that do get government funding. Kean didn't like that. Kean didn't like that one bit. It turned into a little bit of a pissing contest in a big hurry. Kean Bexley retweeted us and said, these rumors are fake, and if you insinuate that they are true, take notice, Nate. I will sue you for every dime you're worth. I don't care if I only end up with a pocket full of change. Hurtful? No. To be clear, we said that were rumors. We said we didn't know if they were true. So he can't sue us. He can, but it would be a waste of money and we would get costs. So whatever. But it did inspire us because one of the FOIPs that we did had to do with Mr. Bexley's media org, performance art troupe. I don't know what to call it. I don't know what the terminology is. So tonight, before we talk about Adriana LaGrange, we'd like to spend a little bit of time talking about Mr. Bexley. Now, in putting together this segment, we had the FOIP results that we're going to share with you, but we needed a picture of Mr. Bexley. So we Googled it, and we just went with the first photo hit that we got. I don't know what our browser settings were set to, but this is just the first one that we got. It's from an article from, I think it's 2018. That article's been up the whole time. So, that's the Kean picture that we're going to use for the purposes of the next few minutes. Let's get to the FOIP. So, a little while ago, there was a great big kerfuffle over something that the Counter Signal said. I can't remember what it was, but it took us over to the Counter Signal's website. And we found this. This was on November 4th, I believe. And he's making some comments about Jody Gondek launching a reputation rehab campaign, whatever. But what struck us is the Jody Gondek story is a sandwich of two banners. One of them says better income, better jobs, better cost of living, public service. It's better here. Find out more. Alberta. Why, that looks like a Government of Alberta website banner. Just below it, Ottawa's energy production cap will make groceries more expensive. Scrapthecap.ca. Alberta government. Huh. Well, that's certainly weird, certainly reminiscent of some other banners that we saw, not but a year ago, over at the Western Standard, because the Western Standard was advertising for the Alberta government. Such a strange thing. The Western Standard was doing advertising for wildfires. They were doing advertising for the trades as well. They had a bunch of other government advertising campaigns that they were running. Now, some people said, when we started pursuing this a little bit, some people said, "Oh, you see, that's just a website auto-population thing. That's not them. They don't have deals with the government. They would never do that because the Western Standard has on their website they're absolutely not government funded." And yes, before we get to it, we absolutely checked. The counter signal also is unbiased. Sorry, I could barely get that word out. I don't know why. Non-government funded news, according to their own website. If you want to sign up for their newsletter, don't know why you would, but if you did, then this is the first step that you need to take to defend your access to unbiased, non-government funded news. Okay, so this is an interesting little pattern going on here. We've got the Western Standard has these banner ads. The Counter Signal has these banner ads. The Western Standard says they don't take any money from any governments. The Counter Signal says they don't take any money from any governments. But if you remember from the beginning of last year, we did a whole episode on how actually, yes, the Western Standard was in fact taking up money from the Alberta government for these advertising campaigns. There were multiple advertising campaigns that the Western Standard was contracted directly with the provincial government and paid an undisclosed amount. Now, this is where it gets wild, extra wild, because we were not given the amounts that the Western Standard was paid to run those advertising campaigns because it was confidential, proprietary information or something. And the government could never release anything that was like that. Now, we issued a complaint to the Office of the Information and Privacy Commissioner because that sounds like a hot load of bullshit when it comes to how taxpayers' money is being spent. I certainly think the taxpayers deserve to know how much money is going towards certain media outlets because on one hand, the Western Standard's value proposition is we don't take any government money, but we can prove that they do take government money. We just don't know how much. So, wonder if the Counter Signal does the same thing. So we filed us a FOIP. Please provide the total amount that has been paid to the media organization, the Counter Signal, for any and all government advertising, including but not limited to public service Alberta campaigns, the Scrap the Cap program, because that's the one that we found, so we knew, and any other advertising campaigns from the period of October 6, 2022 to November 5th, 2024. Additionally, please provide a complete list of all of the advertising programs that the media organization, the Counter Signal, has been engaged to advertise on behalf of the government of Alberta. Now, when we filed that FOIP, we expected that we were going to have to play the same game that we played with the Western Standard's FOIP, which is we filed FOIP, we get some redacted numbers back, we then go to the Office of the Information and Privacy Commissioner and say, hey, this feels like bullshit. And then a year from now, we get the results of that investigation. But for reasons that I don't claim to understand, we'll call it government inconsistency because that's what we called it in our social media posts. We got the whole enchilada. We got all of the campaigns that have been running with the Counter Signal since that time period. And it looks like it started in December of 2023. And rotating through ministries, the Counter Signal has been receiving roughly $12,000 every single month. Some of them overlap, but rough payments of $12,000 every single month from the government of Alberta for advertising campaigns that, from what we can tell, are these little banner ad thingers. The total amount of taxpayers' money that the Counter Signal has received since December 18th, 2023 to December 15th, 2024 in 1 year is $116,000 and $800 more. That's how much money has been going directly to the Counter Signal. Now, we had planned originally to do a whole history on Mr. Bexty and a whole history on the Counter Signal. We're still going to do that once the crazy of Alberta politics settles down, because there's so much to talk about there. But it's fascinating when you think about the fact that the standards for government on what constitutes a journalist are so very high. But the government will happily hand over $116,000, almost $117,000 over the course of a year to Keane Bexte and the counter signal, who have some problematic conversations. You can Google the things yourself, but we're going to do a whole episode of that down the road. Now, as we were looking at this whole debacle with the counter signal, in a year getting almost $120,000 of taxpayers' money, despite the fact that they claim to be not government funded. And again, if you want to get into the nuances of, but they weren't getting a subsidy. Okay, cool. Then they should say that they're not getting government subsidies, even though if you take a look at the advertising rates, there's some questions. Because we decided, just for fun, to take a look at some of the other verifiable ways that the government of Alberta advertises. So we went over to their Facebook page, the government of Alberta Facebook page, and we took a look at just the last 4 months of 2024. So this is roughly 33% of the government's advertising spend in a year. They demonstrably got 8 million views of advertisements using Facebook ads. For that 8 million views, they spent $38,399. If we assume, because Facebook gives you a range for what the amount of the spend is, if we assume the highest spend on all of those ranges, $38,399 for 8 million views. Now, I don't want to cast aspersions, websites being what they are these days, though. I'm not sure that a paywalled website is clocking 8 million views in 4 months, 24 million views in a year. I don't know. Mr. Bexte hasn't provided his analytics, so I suppose we'll probably never know. But it's up to you whether or not you think that $120,000 of taxpayers' money going towards the counter signal, which is a paywalled website, is a good spend of taxpayers' money. But it got us to wondering, maybe that's why the UCP MLAs felt the need to give themselves a pay raise. Because Mr. Bexte and his performance theater troupe, media organization, I don't know what the proper term is, was making almost as much as a government MLA from taxpayers. But we're not done yet, because we got one other FOIP that we gotta talk about here, and this one gets so confusing so quickly. So let's take a little bit of a walk down memory lane to start with.
Typically, when a province decides to opt out of a program, they're only allowed to seek compensation if they guarantee that the same spirit of the federal program is then enacted in the province. So I'm wondering if you'll commit to making drugs for both diabetes and birth control free to all Albertans who are not covered by opting out of this program.
Well, Brianna, I'm sorry I can't see you, but I can hear your question. What I would say is that we already provide over 5,000 drugs through our robust Pharmacare program here in Alberta, which include diabetes medication, which includes birth control medication. So we would be absolutely willing to enhance those programs. All we need is the federal government to provide those dollars to us, and we will make sure that we enhance the programs, because we do have, as I specified yesterday in my interviews, that we have a very robust Pharmacare program here in Alberta.
So just clarifying, you are committing to making those 2 drugs free to anyone who's not covered?
Well, it's not just 2 drugs. It's a series of different types of drugs and different types of processes, whether, with birth control, it's pills, but there's also in uterine devices, etc. So it's the gamut of what's available. So what we currently have available and fund, we would look to enhance those, absolutely. But we need the dollars to do that. We want to avoid the bureaucracy. I don't think the federal government understands that provinces do have processes in place. They have suppliers. They have an administrative network already set up. And they're looking to provide new, something different, which adds bureaucracy and administrative burden on top of what we already have. So give us the dollars, we'll spend it in those areas. And I have to wonder, is this actual universal health care when, in fact, they're just providing in two specific areas, diabetes and birth control? My understanding of Pharmacare and universal health care.
That was Adriana LaGrange back in February of last year. And she was asked that question in response to the announcement that came from the federal Liberals and the federal NDP that they were rolling out a universal Pharmacare program. The first steps in a universal Pharmacare program. Now, the announcement of that program is very, very clear. We're starting with these two categories. We're starting with diabetes medications, and we're starting with birth control. It's just the first steps, though. We're just getting started. We're going to work towards covering all of the things eventually, but we got to start somewhere. So we're going to start with this. We can do this. This is what demonstrates to show the most positive impact for the largest amount of people for the start of the program. But the UCP has ever since then done a very, very good job of being like, oh, but I thought universal meant everybody, everywhere, all at once. And we have this robust program. They really like that word robust. The problem is, and if you go back through our back catalog, we did a whole 45 minutes that we're not going to repeat tonight because nobody wants that. The Alberta programs aren't that robust, and they still have copays. They still have premiums. So you still have to pay a deductible. Even if you're on one of the robust Alberta healthcare plans that are conducted through Blue Cross, there are still deductibles that you still have to pay. So it's not universal. It's not free, which is what this program is designed to be for the diabetes medications that it covers and for the birth control stuffs that it covers. So that's really important to keep in mind. There's a little bit of gameplay that's going on right out of the gates. Now, it's not surprising that the UCP and Adriana LaGrange turned around and were like, but what if you just gave us the money? What if, okay, love your plan, but what if you just gave us the money? It's not a surprise that they would do that because that's what they do with pretty much every federal program. But things got more confusing the more time went on.
Okay, so look, I understand that what people think a national pharmacare program is that it covers 100% of drugs, 100% of the time, 100% of the dollars. That's not the case. And I'll tell you the conversation I'd have to have with my dad, who is on our seniors pharmacare program. It covers 7 drugs for him. He doesn't have diabetes, so it doesn't cover insulin. So I'd have to say, Dad, would you like me to cancel your coverage and we'll pay 100% of your birth control? Because that's all the federal program covers. It covers diabetes and birth control. 2 types of diseases. Our Pharmacare program, covers 5,000 drugs. There is no possible way that I would put people at risk of having their drugs not being covered by opting into such a deficient federal plan. If the feds want to come to us...
It's a case of one or the other. You couldn't have both?
Well, no, because that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to come in. What we'd have to do, I guess, is create some kind of carve-out where I suppose you'd keep our plan and then there'd be a secondary plan that would only cover those 2 types of products right from $1. But why would you create a program like that? That's bananas. What you would do is if they wanted to deal with us in good faith, they'd come to us and say, what do you currently cover? And we'd tell them, well, we cover 50 different types of birth control. And we also cover 9 different types of insulin, plus $2,400 worth of insulin products. Would you like to work with us to expand that to cover more people? Would you like to work with us to make sure that our 5,000 drug plan can be applied to people who aren't covered? If that's how they approached us, you bet. That's how I'd want to do it. But that's not what they want to do. They want to create a 2-drug plan, pretend to the public that they're doing something comprehensive, universal, that will cover everything from $1, and it's just not true. And so it's 100% politics, and they're trying to wedge people on what they hope it will be, but that is not what it is. And I'm not going to compromise people's current drug plans, making them believe that the federal drug plan is going to be better. It's 2 types of medications. That's it.
Except she didn't really clarify it. She didn't really clarify it at all, because what Danielle Smith said is, oh no, it's either or. And this is the problem with your province, your premier, is the host sounds very nice, but he doesn't press Danielle Smith when she answers questions with some word salad. And she answered a question with the word salad because he asked, is it either or? And then she kind of danced around it a little bit. And to be clear, it's 100% not either or. If somebody was to avail themselves of the federal program, there is no way that they would be kicked off of an existing provincial program unless the provincial program decided to kick them off. It's simply not designed that way. Now, you can get, if Danielle Smith and the UCP want to get upset because, well, they're calling it universal pharmacare and they're just getting started with it. It's not happening instantly overnight. That's not honest. I mean, pot meat kettle, but sure, there's a valid point on a technicality. Yes, the entirety of a universal pharmacare program has not been announced. It has not been ruled out. That is technically true. But there's also an expression about babies in bathwater. And this program would provide no deductible access to a large number of diabetic medications and a large number of birth control. So it's not as bad as Danielle Smith makes it sound. It's not an either or. The only way that it could be an either or is if Danielle Smith said, fine, if somebody decides to use anything that's on the federal program, we're going to kick them off of our provincial programs, which would be draconian, to say the least.
On the pharmacare again, I'm wondering, with the idea of covering contraceptive and diabetes for that 24% or 26% of people who do not have coverage, why would that not be a good starting point and sort of expand from there? Why are you sort of all or none?
Well, I guess the way I look at it is when somebody signs up to a drug plan, they want the drug plan to cover what their particular ailment is, as opposed to what the government thinks that their ailment ought to be covered. And so that's my concern, is that as I made the comment, my dad has 7 different drugs that he's on our Blue Cross plan. He's not on insulin, and he doesn't need birth control. So for someone like him, it wouldn't be very helpful to have only insulin and birth control covered. He would need those 7 other conditions covered. And I suspect the vast majority of Albertans are in the same boat, that many people, when they're on medication, don't just need it for one thing. And so why not take a program that we currently have that covers 5,000 different types of drugs, including the drugs that the Prime Minister is concerned about, birth control and diabetes, and then just find a way to expand it to the people who currently don't have coverage. That just seems to be a bit more of a sensible approach, as opposed to taking a piecemeal approach.
And did you put that to the Prime Minister, and did he seem open to that idea, or was he dug in on the idea of contraceptive and diabetes only?
Look, I mean, I think we all know how expensive this is going to be. If you had a comprehensive Pharmacare program that covered every molecule from first dollar, I think it's a $40 billion program, and they simply don't have the money for that. And so I think there's sort of some practical reality that we have to work together on this. We have demonstrated that we've put together a plan that can cover a far greater range of drugs, including the drugs that he's concerned about. And so if we can find a way to expand the existing plan we have to more people, that would seem to me to be the best way to move forward. So I've asked my health minister if she would work with her counterpart.
So again, the theme all the way through February, all the way through March was, well, we would like the money, though. How about you just give us the money and then we will do with it? We'll do a good job. We promise we'll do a really good job. We'll do the bestest job. That was the theme all the way through February and March. But as the bill got closer and closer to actually passing all of the things, to getting through the Senate and becoming a thing, as it got closer and closer to that, the narrative started to change. And all of a sudden, we started to hear Danielle Smith. We started to hear editorials talking about, but if they went with the federal program, there'd be so many people who would get kicked off. They would lose their coverage. It would be so bad. We could never, ever do that. And it was very difficult to understand, where's this number coming from? What's happening? And it wasn't until Adriana LaGrange actually testified in front of the Senate in regards to the bill that would provide national health care that we finally got something that we could sink our FOIP teeth into.
For us, there's many questions. As I indicated, when we did our research, there's roughly about 100,000 people that wouldn't even qualify. So again, what is What is the purpose? Why are we duplicating services that already exist in Alberta?
Can I ask
that we're
you?
already funding?
Can I ask you how do you arrive to this 100,000 vulnerable people that would not qualify, considering I'm not saying it's universal, but that for those two classes of drugs, they're free. You know, I suppose now you say you have people who work and who have modest revenues. They have to pay a franchise, I'm pretty sure. So I'm wondering, how do you calculate this 100,000 vulnerable people that would be negatively impacted by C-64?
Well, that was a review done by my department to look at the impacts of Bill C-64 as it currently exists, as we understand it, with the very limited, and I'll say very limited, information that we have, with the lack of consultation that we've had during the process, that this is what they were able to determine and share with me. There is again, opportunity for us to have further discussions on this. But at this point in time, there are healthcare programs out there that are available to Albertans and to other Canadians, I'm sure. As I indicated earlier, the Canadian Health and Life Insurance Association, McKesson, and the Canadian Generic Pharmaceutical Association all have expressed concerns because they have programs in place that currently offer more than what this limited offering will offer to Albertans and to Canadians. And there is also a concern about sustainability, fiscal sustainability. When we look at the limited resources that the federal government has and the expansion of need right across this province and across this country, we know that to duplicate programs that already exist seems like that there should be more thought going into that.
Thank you, Minister.
I know that the federal government has federal jurisdiction over the First Nations. And
thank you, Minister
LaGrange. From our First Nations that there is a lack there.
Thank you,
Minister
LaGrange. That's fine. It was important to hear the questions and the answers. We are around the table a tad confused about your statement that 100,000 Albertans would be less better off. If you can share any materials where that.
We're going to share some materials. Because we filed a FOIP on that, because all of a sudden we had this new number that was coming around, this 100,000 Albertans that would lose their coverage. They wouldn't have any access to coverage. And the most rational, reasonable people went, okay, but if the birth control and the diabetes medications is covered by the federal government and it's free and it's covered, then how would they not suddenly be covered for those things? And again, it came back to the assumption that everybody made was that it had to do with the UCP would pull the coverage for the other things, which may very well be a part of the conversation. But we have a pretty good idea where some of those numbers came from, because we did file a FOIP request where we requested specifically the impact of any research or investigation or review performed by the Ministry of Health in regards to the impact of Bill C-64, an act respecting Pharmacare, on the administration or delivery of existing or future Pharmacare programs in Alberta, as cited by Minister LaGrange in her testimony to the Senate Committee on October 2nd, 2024. Because now she said they did the work, they did the things, and we got some results. Now, as always is the case, a lot of it was redacted. Some of it we weren't given access to because it was confidential or whatever. But what we did get access to was pretty wild, because if you listen to LaGrange's answer, she dropped a couple of company names. And we were given what appears to be a bit of a flyer for one of those companies, McKesson Canada's perspective on national pharmacare, an achievable solution for Albertans. So This particular piece is very, very interesting because one of the things that a lot of people have expressed concerns about is the idea that the UCP government is taking its notes from industry as opposed to doing its own research and making sure that what the decisions that they're making are in the best interest of Albertans. So to get this little brochure / sales pitch, and you'll see what I mean in a second, in our FOIP results was pretty wild because McKesson, for anybody who's unfamiliar, they provided a bio. They're a leading provider of healthcare solutions, expediting and streamlining patient access to vital medications across the company. They have 1,800 employees in Alberta, 2 distribution centers in Edmonton, 339 independent pharmacy members, and 76 Rexall locations. They own Rexall. The 13 national accredited INVIVA infusion clinics, and they're proud to distribute flu, COVID-19, and other public health products on behalf of the government. So they're kind of a bigger entity in the land of pharmacies and pharmacy healthcare. And what did they have to say about their very optimistic perspective on national pharmacare? Well, there's a couple of different things that came out. One of the things that they believed is that universal drug coverage is achievable and can be implemented in a sustainable way. No Canadian should be forced to choose between buying groceries or paying rent and having their prescriptions filled. National pharmacare policy should not leave anyone worse off than they are today. And here's where the rubber starts to meet the road. Canadians would be best served by a model that focuses new spending on Canadians without access to any drug coverage. This approach would also be the most sustainable for provincial governments. So already we're talking about what's in the best interest of provincial governments. And there were some scenarios that McKesson played out for the recipients, we'll say, of this thing. They provided 3 different scenarios where they talked about if the switch was flipped on this thing overnight, if there's no transition plan, which is a pretty big if, then there could be up to 269,128 patients who need to make a switch of their coverage. They might have to change their drugs too. That could mean 134,000 appointments for endocrinologists. Oh, we don't have that many endocrinologists. That's almost 2,000 appointments per endocrinologist. A lot of money. It's like $10 million. That's like 10 years of Danny travel. It's big bucks, folks. Scenario B, if only patients with no drug coverage are placed on the National Pharmacare list, there'd still be 55,000 patients that needed to switch. There's still tons of endocrinologist appointments, but cost goes down $2 million. And then if they only did it for coverage for diabetes drugs, cost went down slightly lower. Where it gets wild, though, is where did we get these numbers from? Did we get them from Alberta? No. If you look at the fine print, the data source, patient counts were extrapolated using Ontario as reference patient counts, and Ontario drug costs were derived from the PDCI claims database. Patient counts for privately insured patients are estimated using McKesson Canada wholesale shipment data in Ontario. So McKesson's pitch to the provincial government was apparently predicated on Ontario data. And again, this is Ontario data from a private pharmaceutical / pharmacy company. So I'm not saying they're wrong. I'm just saying when somebody says, "Hey, I run the business, you should listen to me." There's reason for a little bit of I don't know about that. Maybe I should proceed with caution. I would make the argument, he said, though, that if that person is saying, "I run the business, I know the things, but also let me pitch you something," that's when you have to really exercise another level of caution. Hey, was there anything in that McKesson report that we were provided from the Alberta government through the FOIP process that said that McKesson was trying to pitch a particular policy idea? Oh, there was! Because McKesson has this theory that the best way to do national pharmacare is not actually utilizing anything that the federal government has mapped out. They believe in the $100 solution. From the report, the $100 solution could achieve universal coverage in a fiscally sustainable manner by extending public drug plan coverage to the currently uninsured. Okay, so now we're talking about universal coverage if you don't have insurance, which is an even bigger deviation from what the provincial government was saying they wanted. They wanted it to be universal for everybody. Nobody pays anything. McKisson's coming back and saying, no, $100. If it's per capita, everybody in Canada gets $100 to their name, and that's what they get for provincial funding. Then we can cover the uninsured. Under the sustainable funding, established capital funding of approximately $100 per capita, $4 billion, to ensure provincial drug plans have sufficient resources to provide coverage to all currently uninsured Canadians. Provinces to continue to establish parameters of their drug plans. So the provinces get all the money and they get all the control. Provinces mandate all residents to acquire drug coverage, either privately, employer-based, or via the public drug plan. And this is where it gets really interesting. Employers of a certain size, a minimum size, are mandated to offer comprehensive drug coverage to their workers. So McKesson's plan is make it a law nationally that all companies of a certain size have to provide comprehensive drug coverage to their workers. But this is where the sales pitch gets really wild, because McKesson argues that when deployed provincially, the $100 solution would essentially overpay provinces that have already invested in strong public drug plans. And then it provides the funding required by province to address the public coverage gap and the provincial allocation of the $100 solution. And what it says is, in effect, that because Alberta is 4.15 billion people, they would get 415 million per year. Sorry, yeah, 4.15 billion per year. They also are making the argument, it appears in this slide, and we've run this by a couple of healthcare policy experts to make sure that we're not reading this wrong. They appear to be making the argument that if we were to go with this $100 per capita healthcare plan, that there would be extra money left over for the provinces to do with for healthcare as they see fit. They then also included a slide of very scary things for when other things have rolled out. And to be clear, the stories that they talk about, a child with cancer who was receiving chemotherapy drugs covered by the patient's plan. When OHIP Plus was implemented, the drugs weren't automatically covered by OHIP Plus under the public drug formulary. The private plan withdrew coverage as soon as OHIP Plus came into effect. However, the child did qualify for OHIP Plus through the Exceptional Access Program, but the doctor had to fill out an application and paperwork for the EAP, receive approvals, etc. This process took 8 weeks, during which the child was denied chemotherapy coverage, which is terrible. And to me, suggests not a problem with the plans, but rather a problem with the implementation. And so why would we throw out universal coverage of diabetes medications and birth control medications for all Canadians because we have a scary story or two? It doesn't make any sense when there could be provisions built into the rollout of this program to make sure that those types of situations don't happen. Especially given, I'm not too sure how many kids of very young ages are using birth control. I bet it's probably a pretty small number. I could be wrong. But the point remains, that is not a problem with the federal program. That is a problem with implementation. That's a problem that can be easily addressed. And to say instead of getting on board with the federal program, what you should do is argue for a national pharmacare program that is $100 for every single Canadian, where that money goes explicitly to the provinces. And if somebody doesn't have coverage through their work, then they get covered by a provincial plan, but it's entirely up to the province's discretion how that plan is implemented and structured. This is the report, according to the FOIP results that we got, that the Ministry of Health was using to determine whether or not they should object to the national pharmacare program. This is the report. Apparently, based on the FOIP results that we got, that the government is saying this is where those numbers come from. Ontario. But again, the greater point here is that yet again, we have apparently, I mean, we don't know what we weren't sent, but what we were sent strongly suggests that what's happening yet again is rather than the government listening to policy experts, listening to subject matter experts in deciding what course they want to pursue, they're listening to corporate interests, particularly corporate interests that align with their own political values of we just want all the money, which isn't in the service of Albertans. It's in the service of craven politics. So that's our second FOIP. All of our FOIPs that we've received are now clear. So there's the counter signal one, there's the Adriana Lagrange McKisson one. We're all caught up and we're going to be ready for next week. That is our show for tonight. Going to do all the plugs though, because as a couple of folks in our comment section are saying, oh, Bexley's going to sue you anyways. I hope he doesn't, but I haven't said anything that's not true or backed up through government data. So like, discovery would be pretty wild, but whatever. There's all the things. So here's the plugs. As always, we have the merch for sale. We've got the coffee cups and the hoodies. You can go to abpoly.ca and you can get all of those. We have the t-shirts. There's a couple of t-shirts. Well, there's one t-shirt that I've approved for fundraising specific to our legal fund as he pivots from, I hope Bexley doesn't sue me. But we have one t-shirt that's being produced with my approval that says don't let the breakdown get slapped dirty. So there's that one as well. And then we also have, as always, our limited edition cuffed hoodies, the beanies, the toques. They're toques. We're Canadian. They're toques. Yeah. So there's that. A couple other things that I have to run down the mention of things. If you are appreciating the kind of content that we're trying to produce here, then we'd love nothing more if you signed up to be one of our Patreon sponsors at www.patreon.com/thebreakdownab. And I'm not saying that you should, because Bexley went out of his way to produce a promo code for people who sign up at his website. I'm not saying that you should sign up just to spite Bexley, but you could. I mean, that's up to you. But you can sign up to be one of our Patreon sponsors at www.patreon.com/thebreakdownab. We do also understand that there are some folks who are not big fans of the long-term commitments. So if you just want to help us cover the bills, the costs of doing the breakdown business, filing the FOIPs, and all of that kind of stuff, then you can always send us an e-transfer to info@thebreakdownab.ca. And finally, we do and are still, our GoFundMe for the legal sitch is still up. So we are I'm still being sued for $6 million by Sam Mraiche of MH Care. If you want to know the background on all of that, and if you want to lend a little bit of support, you can do that with visiting the website www.savethebreakdownab.ca. If you're listening to the audio version of this podcast, would love it if you left the stars and the reviews and all of that good stuff. And if you are on the YouTubes, then as smash the subscribe and the little bell so that you know every time we do like a little short or we do a new episode. And that's all of the things. So there we go. I want to say a huge thank you to everybody in the chat. Thank you. I got started reading the chat and then I got distracted. But I want to say a huge thank you to everybody in the chat, the chat community that we have here. As I wait to download the things so that we can post it everywhere. My favorite thing to do is always read through all of the chat comments. So I want to say a huge thank you to everybody who shows up and engages in the conversation and the little debates that we have. Like I can see right now, we're talking about whether or not the healthcare bill happened. The Pharmacare bill happened, and the people are saying, yeah, no, it did. It happened. So that's awesome. So that's it. That's everything, everybody. I forgot. I do owe an apology, though, because last week I was so fired up that I forgot to play the clip before the final wrap up. So here's the clip.
How's your BS detector evolved over time?
I tend to.
The person down in Washington, D.C. this weekend fighting for Alberta, Danielle Smith. It just gets better and better every time. Like normally, if there's something that I find funny, I'll watch it a couple of hundred times and it's like, no, I'm good now. I am not at that place yet. That clip never, ever gets old. Big thank you to everybody. We will be back next week to see what the post-Donald apocalypse looks like. And we'll hopefully have us a bit of an open mic then. I don't know. We'll see. If anybody, I'm going to throw this out to the audience. If you guys have a smart way that we could have it so that people could call in without having to use the X, the Twitter, send us an email, send us a DM, info@thebreakdownab.ca, because the X is kind of dying off, and the progressive side, Blue Sky doesn't do anything like that. We're on Blue Sky too. So we would love to be able to have that conversation piece going again. So if you have any ideas, send us some tech support stuffs on that. In the meantime, and in between time, it's going to be a nutty week. There's no getting around it. Tomorrow, Donald Trump gets inaugurated. 100 executive orders, allegedly, some of them including economic warfare on the country of Canada. Danielle Smith is going to Danielle Smith, so we'll have plenty to talk about next weekend. But in the meantime, and in between time, as always, take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and keep the conversation going.
Thank you.